Let's talk leashes. I want to cover my favorite setups for winging, downwinding, parawinging, all the fun stuff. And I'm going to start this by disclosing that I do get a bit of support from Forward Whip. All these products are going to be from Forward Whip, but I want to talk generically about leashes and what I sort of recommend so you can go for your life with your preferences for different brands. So let's kick it off with board leashes. When I do use a leash, it's usually for things where I'm not going ridiculously fast, like wing foiling. It'll be things like sup downwinding and parawinging. And when I do, I like having a leash that is light and can stay out of the way. And that's where this style of material that Forward Whip does is really cool. It's like a bungee webbing style. It's nice and light. It's not like your traditional sort of rubber kind of leash, but it has the necessary dampening feature of that rubber, traditional style leash incorporated into it. And it's got a swivel on it as well, which is nice and handy. I think the important thing to have with a board leash is nice and light, but in order to have nice and light, you still need to have some type of dampening. Otherwise, you're gonna risk ripping the leash plug out of your board. This leash does that really well. So you have that dampener, and then you've got a nice light material in that waved style of webbing. Other thing you can consider with a board leash is a quick release. This is a setup that has a quick release. All you do is pull and the two parts separate from each other. Situations that I can see this being really helpful in are if you're in big waves and you are concerned about getting your leg or your leash attachment or whatever ripped away from you in a sketchy situation and you need to abandon your board really quickly. This style of leash is really handy as well. I think they just call it the Forward Whip wave leash or something along those lines, and it's that same nice and light waved webbing material, but yeah, with that quick release incorporated into it. Personally, I don't get in those style of conditions that often, so I really stick with this for my downwind and for my parawing style of setup. And what you'll notice is there's no cuff on it, it's a carabiner. And I'm a massive fan of using carabiners on leashes. And that's pretty much because of this. This is my impact vest. It has leash attachments on the back, and it's got a leash attachment on the front for when I'm doing some parawing and some winging sort of stuff. But before we get on to that, let's touch on my leash setup for winging, and that is no leash. I started to learn the hard way that a leash when you're going fast is not a good thing to have. But if you are going to go without a leash, you need to have this skill. If you haven't learnt how to flip your wing and body drag to get you back downwind to your board that may be getting carried away with the ocean bumps, then you shouldn't be leaving the beach without a leash. And it's tough when you're starting to push those speeds and you want the peace of mind of having your board nearby. The only real solution that I've seen for this sort of situation is this. What this is, it's a Velcro quick release. So whilst this style of leash gives you some dampening and prevents your plug from ripping out of your board, it's still a bit dangerous to have when you're hitting 30 knots plus. I use this Velcro quick release when I'm out training by myself. It's a bit of a sketchy day, and I just want the peace of mind of knowing that if I do have a really big stack, I'm not going to have the danger of the board flinging back at me from a leash. I'm not going to do damage to my board, but my board's going to be somewhat nearby, because what happens with this one is you'll have your board leash, hooked in, and then when it loads up a lot, and I mean it takes a lot to load this up, the Velcro, which is doubled over on itself, rips open, and your board stays just a leash distance away. Kills the kinetic energy of your board in the crash, so that the board doesn't carry on further away from you and send itself down a wave getting really far away. You'll know that your board's somewhere in the vicinity of you, but you'll know that you don't have a foil flinging back at you and you don't have a plug being ripped out of your board at the same time. that's my current perspective on leashes for boards. And then we jump into wing and parawing sort of setup. I use the same sort of thing. It's just a Dyneema and bungee leash. There's plenty of brands that make these. Forward Whip have a really nice swivel with their carabiner. It works really nicely. What that does is it stops it from twisting up and ending up in a big mess. And I like the simplicity of a carabiner, especially when you're wearing an impact vest. You've got this saddle at the front, so you just hook it on, that runs to your leash, and you never, if you use a harness, you never have an issue with the leash getting caught in the harness. The only downside of having it to your impact vest that I've found is sometimes you'll be surfing, you'll have your wing in the surf handle, you'll fling it behind you on a wave, and then you actually do a handle pass behind your back, and then you've actually kind of tied yourself, not in a knot, but you've done a wrap around your body. And then when you go to bring the wing out in front of you, you don't have enough length in the leash. When I used to do that handle pass, I could then just bring my hand over the top and that would reset the leash. You know, it would unloop myself from the leash. But when it's to my waist on my impact vest, you're kind of just stuck in that wrap unless you kind of pick it up and throw it over, and it kind of just ruins the flow of that surfing part of your session. So fortunately for me, I don't really do those handle passes much anymore, and if I do, I can just break out one of the Velcro cuffs that normally come with a wing and just run it to my wrist. But I really prefer running it to the impact vest. It's just really clean. You don't have a rope coming away from your hands when you're throwing it into tacks and jibes and all that sort of stuff, so it's a lot more convenient. I'm up to about session 6 or 7 on the Parawing, so take what I say with a grain of salt regarding harness setups and bar setup and that sort of thing. But what I've found to work really well for me is that same setup for the Parawing with the Dyneema, bungee and carabiner. And what I like to do, super simple, there's an eye splice in one end of the leash, you just put it through itself on the bar, like so. And then for me personally, I really like running it to the back of the bar. So this is the front of the bar, that's the back of the bar. And what that does is when I crash, I know that the kite is just going to be depowered in the water. I have seen other people run it, further to the, I guess, the power zone, or further forward on the bar, so that when they crash, the kite stays in the air. I think that really depends on the wind conditions. I think I'm going to play with it further forward in lighter wind conditions. I just haven't really had the Goldilocks sort of conditions for parawing. It's normally been rain squalls and overpowered, and yeah, hoping to have one of those sessions coming up. And then my harness line is just a bit of rope. There's definitely better setups, but I'm learning to really like the simplicity of this setup, so works for me. That's most of my insights from a few years of wing foiling, a bit of parawinging, a bit of sup downwinding. And if you like this video, I think you'll like these ones too, so go check them out.